Welcome, everybody, to the first presentation in our weight loss and wellness workshop. My name is Sherry Stoka, and I am going to get us started talking about weight loss and how it's multifactorial. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with the objectives for today. So the first is to really introduce the microbiome and help you understand its importance to foundational human health. You're going to learn about metabolic dysfunction conditions and how it really is the same cause, but with just different manifestations. You're going to learn how metabolic dysfunction begins. You're going to learn about the truth about glycemic variability, and we'll discuss implications and consequences of visceral fat. So I don't think this is going to surprise anybody. You know, we really do live in a state of, chronic illness. And over 128 million Americans have prediabetes or diabetes. Obesity rates are reaching epidemic proportions globally. So this is no longer, in the US, this is everywhere in the world. Recently, the University of North Carolina School of Global Public Health did a research on US citizens, and they found that 88% of Americans have some type of metabolic dysfunction. It is estimated that 80% of people with prediabetes don't know it. And as you all know, approximately 90% of healthcare costs are tied to chronic conditions. These are preventable lifestyle diseases. So there are so many more statistics that are quite staggering, but this obviously I wanted to start to just help people understand the significance and why we are here today to help. Okay, so this is kind of a snapshot of helping people understand how the human body really is made up of organisms. We have more bacterial cells than we do human cells. And, these organisms collectively are called your microbiome, and they are found everywhere in your body, from your nose, your mouth, your lungs, stomach, colon, sex organs, skin, and they all serve a very, very important purpose. So what's really important to understand is that, yes, there is this imbalance nowadays where we have a lot of unhealthy or non-beneficial bacteria or organisms that are growing, but they essentially are crucial to our life and keeping us healthy. So what affects the microbiome? What affects the balance of this microbiome? A lot of different things. And you can see here, genetics, the environment that you live in, obviously your diet, your lifestyle choices, your hormones, just overall industry. So these are all things that we're, exposed to every single day. So it really is about acknowledging things beyond just food and exercise. So I know this is a super busy slide, but I hope this will again reinforce the importance of this microbiome or all the different species that make up the human body. So as you can see to the left, you see this image, and these are just all the different organisms that can reside in different parts of the body. And so you can see here to the right, this is the digestive tract. This is really what's considered the gut of the body. And the majority of organisms reside in the colon or the large intestine. So you can see here, it kind of breaks up the digestive tract from upper GI, stomach. There's 10 to the second to 10 to the third power of specific organisms that are kind of noted here. And then as you go down into the small intestine, 10 to the fourth and 10 to the fifth power. And when you reach the lower GI, the colon, that's when you get the largest population of different strains of bacteria. And obviously, this is supposed to be here. We again, just reinforcing the fact that it's bacteria is supposed to be in certain segments because they play so many different roles in the body. So where does it all begin? How do we start, when we're born, what really all comes together that sets the stage of this environment? So obviously, the health of your mother is going to play a big part. Whether your mother was healthy, she ate a poor diet, did she have chronic infections? Did she have, your oral health plays a huge role. So all of those things are going to play a role in your health when you're born, because she is passing that along. Now, what's really important is to acknowledge the type of delivery you had. Were you delivered vaginally or were you delivered by C-section? The majority of the really beneficial bacteria cells, lactobacillus, is passed from the mother through the vaginal canal. So if you were not born vaginally, you are missing out on all of those healthy organisms. And then, with C-section comes a lot of different risks and potential for infection and things like that. So then you're potentially having complications. You're on antibiotics as a younger child. And so the beginning of your life really does set the stage. And then as you get older, were you breastfed? Were you formula fed? When did you start drinking milk? And when were solids introduced? So all of that plays a big role. And then as you get older, your overall diet. Do you, as a child, do you eat the standard American diet that is full of pesticides, colors, dyes, additives, that is just literally destroying this gut ecosystem? So we need to look at the gut and we need to look deeper into it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the gut, but I always want to start here because it is foundational. I am going to be talking more about gut health in another presentation. So humans were meant to eat food that fed our healthy or our beneficial bacteria. Those types of foods included dietary fiber. I think everybody, really understands that dietary fiber is very, very good for us. It's good for our digestive health. Prebiotics, probiotics, fruits, vegetables, all of that is very, very healthy. But then you look at the diet that we're actually eating, and this actually kills or destroys the healthy bacteria in our digestive tract. So a really high fat processed diet, high refined grains, and then just, junk food. So it's really starting the stage of creating this imbalance. So some will say we are literally starving our microbiota. And we are. What we know today is that a very diverse ecosystem, so many different strains of bacteria reflect your health, the state of your health. And what we know now is that, back 10,000 years ago, when we ate off the land and we were hunters and gatherers, and, things have obviously, advanced so much into this industrial food world that we live in, the processed food, sanitation, we're sanitizing everything, killing everything off. So all of this now is decreasing the ability of strains to survive. And so you can see here, just at the bottom, you could see, again, just reflecting many different types of species. And then because of our diet, the sanitation, the slew of antibiotics, you put on an antibiotic for everything, hoping people obviously understand that antibiotics don't specifically go after the bad stuff. So it'll go in as a nuclear bomb and just kill everything. And C-section. So all of this is basically causing extinction of our really needed and healthy strains of bacteria. So the microbiome and its role in the body, the microbes or the organisms literally play a role in everything. So our genetic predisposition or expression, obviously our gut health. Microbes are going to drive stress, emotional eating, our medical conditions, autoimmunity is so significant as far as like your gut health, because your immune system, your immune cells sit in your gut. Certain medications destroy these or the healthy organisms. Hormonal changes are affected by our microbes. The way we age and oxidative stress, nutrient deficiencies, there's certain microbes that actually produce certain nutrients. And without those microbes, we don't even get those nutrients because we don't get it through food. Insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction. So at the end of the day, when you look at health as a whole, we can't chase everything, okay? We can't try to help people lose weight by simply, telling them to lower their calories and go on some restricted calorie diet. I mean, we have to be smarter than that. We have to look at the root so that once the root is addressed, everything else can start to fall into place. And then you have metabolic dysfunction, which I stated that the majority of people walking around have some type of metabolic dysfunction. So that can present in many different ways. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but most people understand that all of these conditions here are some type that, basically, means that there's some type of metabolic dysfunction going on. Okay, so humans were meant to feed their bacteria. We weren't meant to have to take all of this other stuff to stay healthy. Again, I think people know this, but we just have gotten so far away from just foundational eating. We have now switched to, again, SAD diet, standard American diet that essentially is killing us. So disease starts very, very early on, way before we even start to feel it, and certainly way before it's found in any type of diagnostic testing that's done, in the medical world we live in. So certain foods that we're eating, standard American diet, is causing inflammation. There are certain foods that fight inflammation. Standard American diet produces inflammation. So, most people also, know that the health of kids now is dire as well. Kids are developing diabetes, fatty liver at a very early age, and it's literally because of the food that we're consuming. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about blood sugar dysregulation. And this is a very big piece to all of this. So let's just pretend this is a graph that's showing somebody who eats a relatively healthy diet versus somebody that eats a diet that's highly processed, and it's not even about the food, it's the foods. It's about how frequently they're eating, how often are you putting something in your mouth, what is the food, is it carbohydrate based? So essentially what I'm trying to show you here is that this green shaded area is where your blood sugars should be at all times. Okay, you might get a little bit of a spike if after a meal, that type of thing, which obviously that can be very normal. It should be minimal, but what is actually happening is people are walking around with this metabolic dysfunction or this blood sugar dysregulation, and they're getting these ebbs and flows, these spikes, these significant spikes all day long. And this is beginning the disease progression. This dysregulation of blood sugars is starting that cascade of first inflammation, and then once inflammation, then the immune system is involved. It really is beginning so early, but nobody knows it. Nobody has a clue what their blood sugars are doing because we're not told that we should know it. So I'm going to just talk a little bit more about that, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what really we should be watching for when we're trying to improve our health. What we know is that glycemic variability is independently associated with poor health outcomes. There's extensive evidence that links glucose variability to cardiovascular complications and oxidative stress, especially in people with diabetes, obviously. Variability in people with normal glucose is more prevalent. And this is just an example. It was a small little study in 2018, but it just showed that you can pull, perceivably, 20 healthy people out of the population and check them for certain variabilities in their blood sugar. So this was post-meal glucose spikes. And it showed that the majority of those people that were supposed to be healthy and not have any issues with their sugars did have irregular spikes, 15% of that reached the pre-diabetic range 15% of the time. So again, 16 out of 20. And again, the majority of these people are just walking around thinking they're fine. Insulin resistance. So, again, going back to the root, what is the root? Think about the gut. And I think about this often because I'm always thinking about, I'm not really sure what happens first. Like, is it, okay, so the poor eating, is your gut more resilient and you just start developing this dysregulation of blood sugars earlier on, and then that dysregulation causes just the beginning stages of the gut issues, or is it the other way? And at the end of the day, you're usually going to see both in any type of sick state. But insulin resistance is such a huge part of this weight loss resistance and this inability for people to lose weight, even when doing, the most basic stuff of, trying to exercise, eating healthy again. So again, insulin resistance, everybody knows, I'm sure who's listening to this, is essentially, insulin's main job is to take all of the sugar that we consume. Obviously, it's not just sugar, the food that turns into sugar when we consume it, and to pull it out of the blood and disperse it to the cells so the cells can use it for energy. So what's happening now is the body either stops responding to insulin because it's overworked and it can no longer keep up with the demands, or your body is just, your body almost gets to a point where eventually it just stops producing insulin altogether. So again, this metabolic condition is starting, and until you are strategic in fixing it, it doesn't, it really doesn't resolve on its own because people are not told how to do it. So just a little bit more of what happens, because this is actually really, really important that, we incorporate in our programs, because, people are not talking about it. So essentially when blood sugars are elevated, you get the spike in insulin, obviously, because, every time you get a spike, you get more insulin. So insulin's usually working a lot. And so once, excuse me. So when sugar is sitting in the blood because insulin can no longer remove it, this starts the inflammatory process. So inflammation is a normal body process when there's injury. And so, and obviously the immune system is also involved. So you get inflammation, you get the immune system that's now alerted because the sugar cannot be removed from the blood and it's causing damage. So obviously the body's going to find a way to get that sugar out of the blood at any way that it can. And so it starts to store it in the fat stores. So what happens is these particular fat stores, they become inflammatory. And the fat stores can actually start producing their own inflammatory compounds. So the key here is that these particular fat stores are very different than, say, like the subcutaneous pinchable fat that, is under your arm or around your waist. This fat, the body will never access for calories. So it will sit there and stay there and accumulate until somebody comes around and tells you how to get rid of it. So weight loss resistance, this is the beginning of weight loss resistance for the majority of people. So most patients, they all come with the same story. We have assessment forms, and we're always hearing they have significant cravings of sugar or carbohydrates. And this is literally, again, their cells are starving for energy because insulin is no longer doing its job. They are tired, extremely tired in the afternoon. So energy levels plummets. This is due to these fluctuations, high blood sugar, insulin overshoots, then they get low blood sugar. So they get really tired. So then they crave more sugar. It's like this chronic cycle. Most people that have metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance are rarely hungry in the morning because they're producing too much insulin. They get a foggy brain after a high carb meal. They have difficulty staying asleep. So again, just some common things that should be that you should be aware of when people are coming in and think, okay, there's probably some issues going on with insulin. So again, just to highlight some of the main symptoms, again, tired after eating, cravings, high cholesterol, bloated after eating, hungry, difficulty losing weight, and high body fat percentage. And basically more of like the visceral versus the subcutaneous, which I will talk a little bit about. So let's talk just a little bit about why the increase in insulin resistance. I think most people know this, but all we do is eat sugar. We eat sugar all day long. Breakfast now has become a dessert. And not only is it causing so much, metabolic damage, it is just driving these intense cravings. Studies, clearly show that sugar, the more sugar you eat, the more sugar you crave. So if you start your day off with, really high sugar breakfast, you're going to be very hungry throughout the entire day. And I just want to make a point that what we see is that oftentimes people don't even realize they're eating all this sugar in the morning. Like you can see the second image here of granola, yogurt, fruit, same thing, no difference. I mean, the amount of sugar in this versus like Fruit Loops is the same. It's like, we really need to be educating these people. Constant spikes throughout the day. Again, insulin is very confused. Insulin's going to overshoot. So you can have hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia, and again, the damage is occurring. Eating carbs and not eating anything else with it is a big problem. So, having a bowl of pasta without any protein or any healthy fats, or having, pasta and bread. I mean, I don't know if we'll still do that as much, but it's so important to always add all the macros in a meal, because that's going to really bring down these, the blood sugar spikes. Artificial sugars increase blood sugars, period. Now, what I will say is everyone is different, but it is super important to acknowledge this. And it's important to stop telling patients that it's okay to they can have Diet Coke and they can have the artificial 0 calorie, this and that, because if they don't know what that's doing to their blood sugar, then you're doing a disservice to them. And this includes gum, artificial gum with 0 calories. This all could drive the blood sugars all day long. Vitamin and mineral deficiencies are also a big problem. We no longer get nutrients in our food. We get calories and we don't get nutrients. So everybody's walking around with nutrient deficiencies. The stress in our life, our body is under stress, and we no longer can handle this physical, emotional stress anymore, because we're just really trying to survive. We're in survival mode. And when we're so stressed, we get these, spikes in cortisol. That's going to increase blood sugars. Then it's going to tell your liver to dump more, because that's how the body was designed under stressful situations. You push more sugar into the blood, because like back in the day, when the body was under a stressful situation, we were running from tigers and lions because we were hunting. And so now we live in this like chronically stressed state. And so the body is, pushing sugar into your bloodstream when it shouldn't be. And so that is something to think about when you're working with somebody in managing their blood sugars and they're eating really, really low carb and doing really good, but they're still getting these elevations. You really have to look at those other things because many different things can drive blood sugars. Lack of sleep, obviously the hormones, and obviously gut health. So this just shows you that there is a insulin. Sorry, thought there was somebody at my door. High levels of insulin promote fat storage. I think people understand that. So low levels of insulin promote fat breakdown. So obviously, you want to make sure that you're getting in those healthy fats and acknowledging that whenever you are eating something that has sugar or is going to be broken down into sugar, you're going to get an insulin spike. Anytime the insulin is elevated, you will be in a fat storing mode. So again, this is where, over the course of these presentations, we're going to really talk about the importance of not only what you're eating, but how you're eating and spreading out meals, because we have to get the insulin down to lower levels. And the different type of fat stores. This is so important to understand. And this is a very simplistic way. I go talk deeper into the different fat stores in another presentation. But when you think about fat on the body, you have the subcutaneous, which is like the superficial belly fat. It's right below the skin. And then you have this visceral fat. So the visceral fat is like the deeper belly fat. So you can see here, this is a high amount of visceral fat. This is lining all of the internal organs, your liver, your gallbladder, your pancreas, all of the essential endocrine organs that are crucial. So when you see a high visceral fat, there's metabolic syndrome. And this visceral fat is actually very active and it's promoting more inflammatory markers all of the time. So this is what we have to go after. So I basically just said this surrounds the vital organs, the stomach, liver, intestines. It's very, very active because it truly does affect how the body functions. And again, it produces inflammatory compounds and hormones that start the disease process. So the correlation with diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cancer, asthma, fertility problems, you name it, visceral fat, or what we are going to be talking about is the abnormal fat or the inflammatory fat. It's all the same thing. So to summarize this presentation, I actually had to divide this presentation into two. So I'm going to be continuing part 2 of multifactorial weight loss. But so the summary is that the gut health cannot be ignored. Glycemic variability is more common than you would think. We must clean up our diets to start the healing process. That is most foundational because, chasing other things without, starting with the diet is really not going to get you very far. So a couple things that you can do today. You're working with your patients is focus on whole food eating, period. We can't promote, the box food because it's more convenient. We have to start giving patients different ideas on how to cook, how to create meals that are easier, but they're whole food based. It just is going to move them along so much faster. If you're not assessing insulin sensitivity and or blood sugar dysregulation, it's probably a good time to start doing that. So that wraps up part 1. In part 2, I'm going to talk about testing and diagnosing certain conditions, metabolic conditions. We're going to dig deeper into the macronutrients, so the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I am going to talk about cholesterol and its misconceptions and nutrients that support weight loss. So hopefully that was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next